Hello guys and welcome back to the gorgeous Peak District National Park once again. So we're here today to do some long exposure photography, take some shots of these beautiful cascades that come down from the side of Kinder Scout. Really beautiful location. So like the Peak District, it does have these pockets of beautiful scenery in abundance actually, and finding these little pockets is really rewarding when you come across something that's just so beautiful you can't help but take a photograph, and this is one of those locations. It really is. So today I'm going to share with you some tips about getting long exposure photographs. I'm going to talk about some photographs that I've taken in the past as well, some problems that I've encountered, and hopefully by sharing those problems as well it might help you make some decisions next time you're out shooting some long exposure waterfall shots. Let's get on this trail a little bit further and see what we can find, guys. I'm looking forward to it, I really am. Can't wait. So I finally got my composition set up here for my long exposure shot, and yeah, I found this really nice scene actually. It looks really nice. Got this overhanging tree here which is giving us some detail and texture for our subject, if you like. Got a lovely foreground interest here in the shape of this rock in the foreground. Managed to position that in the bottom left hand third, so that's quite nice. Acts as an anchor to the image. And then we've got this long exposure, the water cascading through the scene. So when I'm doing a long exposure, what I like to do first is compose my shot. I think that's the key thing really. Without a composition you really haven't got anywhere to go with your shot. So composing the shot is always the first thing I do. And then I have to think about what I want the water to look like. So for this example here, the water's moving quite quickly. I don't need to have a particularly long exposure to smooth that water completely out. At the minute here, I've got a 6-stop filter on, and that's giving me a 4-second exposure. And that's probably over the top really. I don't need to go that far. Probably 2 seconds would do it. But 4 seconds is fine. There's no movement in the trees or anything like that, so that's absolutely fine, and that's really smoothing that water out. It's giving us that really milky look to the water, which is really nice for this shot, I think. Now, I guess what I should say as well is that I'm using a circular polarizer here. Now, what tends to happen when you've got a lot of light coming through from the side or from the back, you get a lot of glare, especially on the water and in the foliage as well. And the polarizer can really cut through that glare. And I've got the polarizer on here on the camera, and as I rotate the polarizer you'll be able to see the effect it's having here on the water and on the foliage. So it's really helping to keep the contrast quite neutral, quite flat in the scene, and help us to balance things out and just take that reflection off the water and help us to see into the scene a bit more and give it a bit more of a richness. So I really like that. Depth of field is something that I always look at first of all when I'm composing a shot. So once I've got my composition sorted out, I'm then thinking about my depth of field. So for this particular shot here, I'm at f11, so I'm focused on this rock here, which is probably about a third of the way into the scene. And at f11, that's giving me everything sharp from front to back that I need to be, in sharp focus. So with my depth of field set, really then it's just a case of working my shutter speed back. I can select the correct density filter depending on how slow I want to get the shutter speed. So for this example here, like I said, I'm at 4 seconds to smooth the water out. Now if the water was moving really fast, then obviously I could go with a quicker shutter speed. Maybe I could go with 1 second or maybe in half a second. It all depends on the motion of the water and also how you want that water to look. You don't necessarily need to smooth it out to get a long exposure. It could just be a tenth of a second or something like that, just adding a little bit of movement. You don't always have to make it smooth, so it's just a creative choice really. So let's take a look at some of the problems that we might have with a long exposure. So here today it's hardly a breath of wind, it's really still, and that enables us to take a long exposure with the water moving, with everything else still. Now on a windy day we're going to have a bit of a problem, because if we've got a 4-second exposure like we had to take this shot, and all the foliage is moving around, then all of that foliage, the leaves, the grasses, is going to become blurred as well. So then we're faced with a problem, Literally, probably the only things I'd have sharp in this image would be the rock down here, maybe the trunk of the tree. Everything else is just going to be a big mushy mess. really, you know, we have to think about the length of our exposure and how much movement we've got in the foliage. So if we can maybe make a 1 second exposure and that's just enough not to get too much motion within the leaves and stuff, then great. If there's a lot of movement within the grasses and leaves, then we've got to think about maybe making 2 different exposures. Now this is something I do now and again, and actually I was at this very location end of last year and ended up doing an image which was 2 exposures. I'll put that on the screen for you right now. And essentially I did a long exposure for the water and then a quicker exposure for the rest of the image. And then I blended those 2 layers together in Photoshop to create an image which has got a long exposure for the water but a quick exposure for the rest of the image, meaning that the foliage, the leaves, the grasses were all nice and sharp. So blending those 2 images together can work really, really well and can really overcome a problem if we've got windy conditions during the long exposure. So this particular spot, the heather, is still blooming. Now I guess it must be because it's in the shade a lot of the day. Kinder Scout, you know, casts quite a heavy shadow down this side of the valley here, so I guess it's perhaps not getting as much sunlight. So that's really, really cool. And as well, just beyond it, we've got this amazing silver birch tree that's just getting its autumnal colours as well, and it's being backlit by the sun. Wow, it's totally stunning, it really is. So I've got my shots set up here, looking at this amazing scene, it really is. Beautiful, intimate scene. We've got the cascade running from the left all the way up to the top right hand third. And I'm going for a quicker shutter speed with this shot. I'm at 1.5 seconds. So I've got the 3-stop filter on this time just to reduce my shutter speed. And at f11, I'm able to get everything in sharp focus from front to back. So that's really, really nice, it really is. We've got this beautiful side light coming through as well, which is really, really nice. And it's just catching the tops of this heather here, and it's backlighting the silver birch tree like I mentioned before, and really making the vibrancy of those leaves pop, really giving it some punch and saturation, which is really, really nice. I think without the light here, this scene might not look quite as nice, it really wouldn't. So that's really nice, and quite often when we're shooting waterfalls and that type of thing, hoping for flat light, so it's really nice to actually come out and shoot in, you know, like a blue sky day like I've got today. So yeah, really, really nice conditions actually for this particular shot right now. So yeah, just to quickly go through the settings again, got the 3-stop filter on, which is giving me 1.5 seconds. I've got the polarizer on as well to take the shine off the water. That 1.5 seconds is allowing me to get quite a lot of detail just in the foreground, in the white water here that we've got on the left hand side. So it's just to not smooth that out too much, just so we can see some of the droplets just, you know, with a bit of motion, so it's giving us a bit of texture in that foreground. And then obviously smoothing the water out as the cascades come down these several platforms we've got here throughout the scene. So that's really, really nice. ISO 200 on the XH1. Yeah, pretty simple stuff. Got the 2-second timer on. So I'm going to go ahead and take this shot now, guys, and I'll put it on for you. Oh, what a lovely day it's been here, shooting these long exposures of these beautiful cascades that we've got coming down off the side of Kinder Scout here in the Peak District. So another thing I always try to do when I'm trying to figure out my composition for a waterfall shot, stream or anything like that is to try to get a pathway through the image. So I'm trying to make sure the elements, maybe a rock or a log or something like that, is not blocking that pathway through the scene. So we've got a clear path all the way through the water as it leads up through the scene. I think I was able to achieve that with both the images as I took today, and I think that does help the viewer to be able to, you know, walk through the image and just explore a little bit more. If you've got something blocking them off, it's very, very difficult for the eye to continue through the scene and look around the image. So I always try to find a nice clear pathway through that stream, so just to help the viewer really look at the image or look into the image a little bit more. Anyway guys, this is actually a location that I come to on some of my one-to-one workshops here in the Peak District. So if you do fancy checking this location out with me and you fancy taking up a workshop, then please do get in touch, and yeah, we can chat about your requirements and stuff. shameless plug over. Anyway guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate your time as always. Please consider liking, subscribing and all that nonsense if you want to see more content like this. Okay guys, take care and I'll see you next week.